and hello to anybody who is watching this when it's no longer live, but is persistent on youtube.com. And welcome to 2018, which is the year you learn to code, if you want to learn to code. And I'm hoping that Glitch can help you out with that. So my name is Jen Schiffer. I am a community engineer at Fog Creek on glitch.com. That's the team that I'm on. And I'm here on glitch.com. We call ourselves the friendly community where you'll build the app of your dreams. And along with providing a space for awesome community, we also give you an in-browser editor so you can build those apps of your dreams. And you can also see apps that other people have made, and you can remix them. And by remixing them, you get your own copy, and it's auto-deployed. And it's cool. You could have something running in just a few minutes. So over the past week for the new year, we have been creating some intro apps for you. This here on this tab is the Intro to Node. First App Node is the project, but we started with an intro to HTML where we built the HTML content of our page, and you can click show live and see we have this page. It's not exactly nice looking, but this is not unlike what the first website ever looked like. But yeah, this is the default styling from the browser. And we just say, are we keeping our New Year's resolutions? I'm hard coding the date, and I haven't done it in a couple of days, so of course the date is wrong, but we're going to fix that with JavaScript. And then we did an intro to CSS where we ultimately made our app look a little bit nicer. We didn't update the HTML. We just added cascading style sheets to make it look a little bit nicer and make like the answer more prominent, stuff like that. And then yesterday, we learned a little bit about JavaScript and how we can use that to make our pages even more dynamic. In the case of this app, we're just using JavaScript to find out what the current date is and automatically update the page to say that date so that you don't have to go into your HTML every day and update it. As you see here in index.html, we have it say today. But then we have JavaScript get the date and then set our HTML to replace today with what the date actually is. And so tomorrow this will say January 6th, and I haven't had to update any code, which is great. That's what computers are supposed to do. They're supposed to make things more efficient for us. And if I don't have to update my HTML and the browser can do it with JavaScript, that's great. We've won. So, I want to talk a little bit about today's app and why I'm live coding. And if you want to follow along, the project is First App Node, which I'm going to type in here. First App Node looks just like the app. I haven't updated the CSS. I've updated the JavaScript, but we've added a couple of files here. And before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about how the web works. So when you want to build your first web page, like you did a couple of days ago, you can go to Glitch and you click Start a New Project. And you have two options. You can create a website or you can create a Node application. I'm not logged in here, so you can create either of these things when you're not logged in. They just go away after 5 days. So if you want something that's more persistent that you can keep forever, then you can sign in through Facebook or GitHub. I like to sign in through GitHub. Okay, so here we go. So this is me logged in. I have an obnoxious animated background for my profile. It's fine. So yeah, when you start a new project, you have an option of a Node app or a website. And like, what's the difference between a Node app and a website? So when you go to a web page, and in the First App Node, I have a short introduction to this. You enter a URL into the browser. Like I've entered the glitch.com editor link for the First App Node. And when I enter that, something happens, something returns to me. That's this page. And that's because there is a server out there somewhere that has the files that create this editor. I have some images showing an example of how the web works, where when you enter a URL, you're asking a server for that info. This image itself on this page was returned to me from a server. So much like when you go to a diner and you ask a server for food, they should return it to you. That is essentially what you're doing when you're browsing the web. You say, I want a website like glitch.com or example.com as I put here. And then the server returns it to you. And then it returns an index.html file. That's like the default that your browser looks for. And in our past HTML project, we had images in it. So in the code, we see like, oh, for example, me.jpg. Well, you need that. So you have to ask that server again to give that to you. And this is sort of like handshake process that happens where you're like, I need this, and it gives it to you. I need that. So when you're building for the front end with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you're building the files that the server is sending to you. Like we've built index.html, we've built style.css, we've built app.js. But we haven't built the code that tells how that server knows what to do when these requests come in. So with Glitch and a lot of hosting companies, you don't have to write that code because that magic is sort of happening in the background already. But you may want to have more control over what the server does or what it returns to you. So you might want to have access to server-side code. And so Node allows us to do that. Node is a sort of, it's not a language. It's not a language at all, actually. It's JavaScript. It's a way for a framework for us to write server-side code using JavaScript. And someone and a large community of people have written Node in other languages to allow us to have to just need JavaScript, which is great because we've learned HTML, we've learned CSS, we've learned JavaScript. Why would we want to learn a fourth language? That might seem bananas and all in 1 week. It is. So Node is great because we have less of a context switch to make when we want to write stuff on the server. And so I want to today go over how I had converted that first app.js app to first app Node. But I'm going to do that with my example app that I had created, which I'm going to go to my profile. And when you go to your profile, you can change your avatar. You can it'll show all the apps that you have. I have an asinine number of apps on my page, which is why it took that time to load. And you can also make your apps private. Like I have a couple of apps that the ones that the flashing yellow going by that you can't see the code in. You can add your bio, of course, your upload cover, which is like very important for it to be cute. And you can pin projects. Like I have some like starter projects and cool things for people to look at. And then I have my projects down here in the order that I've updated them. And my example app is, I didn't want to do a New Year's resolution app because I'm ultimately not going to meet that, I think. But I created an app that lets me track if I've been vaped on this month, which I think is a very relatable problem in 2017 going into 2018. So let's view the source. So if you've been following the My First App series, this is not far from the HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I haven't added any Node yet, but I still have the same index, HTML, and about page. I just updated the text to say, like, have I been vaped on, as opposed to what is my New Year's resolution. I still have a date. I still have a status. And I updated my footer to have the correct link for people to be able to view the source of my page on. So have -I-been -vaped -on is the project name so you can actually follow along. Like I see someone has jumped in and you can check it out. Now, when people view your source, they can't edit it unless you actually invite them in. They can request to join. You can either ignore them or you can let them in to code with you. Today, I will just be coding by myself in here. This is my personal struggle. So, what else do we want to take a look at? Oh, also, so the CSS is a little bit different from the original. As you can see here, it's a little more mono space font, neon, which is definitely my aesthetic. For the original example app, I try to keep it like classy, a little old-fashioned, and like classic New Year's old style. But like for this, I'm like, no, I'm just gonna go like eyes burning magenta lime. I also added a text shadow, so it kind of looks like there's like a vape cloud behind the no, which I think is pretty fun. And if you're interested, you can view the source. I had only changed a couple of colors in the font family, and I added to that status ID element this text shadow. The text shadow property, you say like how many pixels from the center to the right. I said 0 because I want to have it like right behind it. How many from the top? How wide you want that text shadow or vapor to go, and what color. And I said magenta. So for example, I can say if I wanted it to be orange, it auto-deployed, and now I have this like orange vapor, which also looks kind of cute. So I think I'll keep it. And then in our JavaScript from my first JavaScript app project, we had an array of month labels, and we use the date constructor so that the browser tells us what date it is, and we can get information, and date object gives us functions like getMonth, which returns an integer 0 through 11, representing months. If you're new to programming, counting usually starts at 0. After you've been programming for a while, it feels like it makes sense. I can't tell you whether it makes sense or not. I've been doing it for so long. But yeah, we start with 0 because we're not counting on fingers anymore. Computers don't have fingers. And then we have a function called date, which for getDate, which gets the day, which is weird. JavaScript can be very weird, and returns the day of the month, 1 through 31. And then we have getFullYear, returns the 4-digit year. Now, if you're working with dates and you want to know what all these functions are, and you're wondering how does Jen know that these functions exist? The answer is like, I don't know all the time. I like to use if you go to developer.mozilla.org or you just search MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network docs are fantastic. They have lots of tutorials for beginners. I link to a lot of those tutorials in the beginner apps. But a lot of times I'll just Google search stuff, and I'll start with MDN and JS for JavaScript and getDate. And then like usually the first result is the syntax for getting the date, and it will tell me like what it returns, gives me examples, what browsers it works in or not. Because again, when you want to use a function, you want to make sure that it's working in all the browsers that you're expecting your users to have, and so forth. So yeah, MDN, I Google things on the regular. So if you feel like, oh, I don't know all these things, again, I don't know them either, and that's fine. I'm doing pretty okay. Okay, so we have our JavaScript client side, but we don't have any access to the server right now because this is a static site on Glitch. What we can do is we can go to glitch.com and we can look at a new project. Let's say create a new website. This will give us a new static website. And it has just an index.html. It's JavaScript, but it's called script.js. Again, you can call your JavaScript whatever you want. You just have to make sure that the name matches up with where you want to import it. And also you want to name it something that makes sense. And so we also have styles.css. And if we show our live page, it's a very simple static site. This is hi there with magenta, which is good for you to get started and build the app of your dreams if it needs to be static. Now let's compare this to a Node application, or if you click Start New Project and create a Node app. You're going to end up with a few more files. So here we have our HTML, our style, and our JavaScript, but they're in separate folders, and we have these two new files, server.js and package.json. So this is where that sort of magic occurs when a hosting company has to know whether to run a site or not. You have to tell it, when you're running server-side apps, what to do. And package.json, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. This is what it looks like. Essentially, you have within curly brackets, you have, and this kind of looks just like CSS, you have your property and you have your value. And JSON is very finicky. You have to have double quotes for the name and also the value. And then you have them separated by commas, but you cannot have a trailing comma. If I put a comma at the end of this here, I should be getting an error. It's going to try to like load all of Express and stuff like that because I updated it. But what the JSON file, package.json, tells us is what we give it. Like we can give it the name of our app, what version, the description, but the most important part is we're telling Glitch or any hosting company how to start the site. So in this example, we have, we say what our main server file is, and we have one called server.js, which should match to what we have here. And then we have an npm script called start. And so Glitch looks for start and runs whatever command we had given it to start. In this case, we gave it node server.js. And node is a command to start running the node application. And so Glitch sees, okay, when this is ready to go, we're going to run node server.js. And there better be a server.js file, or else we're not going to run it. Let me get rid of that trailing comma. Let's take a look at server.js. So server.js is the code where we tell the server what to do when these things happen. When a server sees, oh, someone asked for the root domain of my application, this is what you got to do. Like we have to code what this is. And so let's take a look at first app node. We are using Express. Express is a type of middleware that allows us to write more concise JavaScript in the Node framework. There's a lot of frameworks when you're working with different languages, and they're kind of like, I like to consider them like different types of slang. Like it usually makes it easier to say something or communicate something. But if you look at other frameworks or you hear people talking in different kinds of slang, it might feel like a completely different language to you and it's overwhelming. And that's definitely the case with JavaScript. But the second most important part of our package JSON is our dependencies. And we are importing Express. And Express is going to let us write Node JavaScript in a way that we don't have to write all that much code. And you'll see here, it's all here on this like one page. There's not much going on. So when we are creating a Node application, we start by importing what our dependencies are. So here we are requiring Express, and we're assigning it to the variable Express. And we've assigned variables in client-side JavaScript before. And then we create our app by calling this Express function. You'll see this at the beginning of a lot of Glitch applications. Now, there are other frameworks that could be used in lieu of Express. I personally am a big fan of Express, and you'll find that there's a large community and it's been around a while, and the documentation is actually pretty nice. And if you want to know more information on Express, then you can just look up Express node docs. If you just type Express, you're probably going to get the clothing store. So I always try to make my search results as specific as possible. And when you go to the Express docs, the first thing you see here is what you saw there in the beginning of that glitch app. This creates an Express application. So that's why we have that there. The way that I format apps typically is I have my HTML pages, the views, as we would call them. These are the pages that are viewed by the user. They're like the more visual aspect or content of the page. I usually keep them in a directory called views. And then I have my static files, like my style sheets, my client-side JavaScript. I put them in a file public. Now, in Express, you can set what folder you call public, but you set what folder you want to be static. In this case, I want public. And what's cool about that is then I don't have to update my index.html to, for example, reference like /public/style.css. So I can make this a node application without having to update my views because I shouldn't have to do that. And so the next thing is routing. We need to tell, this is the part that I mentioned in the README here, we need to have the server know what to do when somebody goes to our app or when someone goes to get an image. So what we have here is on our app, we have a get function, and we say, when we get requested our root app, or just /, no subdirectories, then we want to send our index.html file to that person. And yeah, so that's it. That's like it for how to get them to the index.html page. So when somebody goes to firstappnode.glitch.me, but no like other directories, it's going to send them our index.html code, which is good. And then if we want to send other files, like we have about.html, we need the server to say when they're linked to about.html, send them about.html. So if you have a lot of links to your app, it can get kind of cumbersome, but it's super powerful. And that's like probably the most powerful part of building applications on the web are the linking. Now, I can set this route to be anything. If I wanted to set it to just be /about, which I can do right now. Whoop. Oh, whoopsie. I am not logged in properly. If I change it to like about, then it will send the about.html page still, which is pretty cool. What I want to do is I want to start editing my vape app, though. So let's get out of, have I been vaped on? So what I want to do is I want to structure this app to be just like the node application from first app node. And so I remember the first thing I needed was a package.json file. So I'm just going to add that file. I needed a server.js file. And I needed to fill that with information so that Glitch knows how to get things started. So I could, off the top of my head, try to come up with what the syntax is for a package JSON file, but that's not going to be the case because I can't remember that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the first app node page here, and I'm just going to copy and paste it, which is fine because a lot of programming involves either like Google searching stuff or copy and pasting already existing code. If it's working, then like why fix it? So I'm going to go to this first app node package.json file. And I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it into my have I been baked on app. I'm going to update the name to reflect correct metadata. I'm going to spell it correctly also. I'm going to describe it as a very important app. So I'm being told in the YouTube live chat to stop giving all of our secrets away. Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm the magician's worst nightmare. So now I'm the package JSON, and you can actually look at logs to see like what's going on the server, which is pretty neat. And so it's trying to like install all like the dependencies and stuff, and eventually we're gonna hit a snag because I say start node server.js, but server.js has nothing in it, and so node's going to be like, I don't know what I want to do. So let's see. Now I'm going to copy what's going on in the server here. If you're not into using like copying and pasting from code, and you are coming from a programming background and you want to use like the command line interface, we do offer that on Glitch. So you can like click on the project title, which is where I've changed my avatar and my description, and you can click advanced options and you can open up the console. And then you have a tab where you can then run like npm commands to have all those files, like package.json stuff, filled out for you. But if you're not familiar with the scary, what seems like scary window, and can sometimes still be scary even if you're used to it, you don't have to use the console, which is why we keep it in advanced options, because it's not required to use Glitch. So I've copied and pasted my app, and let's see here. We have the Express app being created. I'm setting our file as public. We have index.html and about.html, but they're not in my folder. So let's set up our file structure here. So if you want to add your files to a folder, you can do that in the terminal, or you can just click rename. And I want to rename this to be views/index.html. And we will rename and create that folder for you, which is pretty cool. And let's move about into there as well. So then we have that. And then we had wanted a folder public that had our static files. So we're going to rename style.css to public/style.css. And we're going to move our client-side JavaScript into public as well. And you can have nested directories and all that fun stuff. Cool. So let's see here. So we have that. We have their view. This is the resolution stuff that was copied over from Node. I'll talk to that about that in a second, but I'm going to comment that out. I'm going to do like a multi-line comment, because remember, this is JavaScript that we're writing. So you can still use the same syntax and the same kind of comments and stuff like that. Okay. So we know that there are no errors now because the show live button is green. So we have our site working. We haven't changed anything that the user sees. All we have done is written the code that illustrates how the server knows to return the stuff when the person has asked for that stuff. So That's pretty neat. Now, why? Why would we ever want to do this? Well, working on things on the server is typically faster and more efficient, and that's sort of the point of programming is as you do things, you want to become more fast and more efficient at doing things. And that's because servers are typically a lot faster and more powerful than your user's browser. The browser is a lot more powerful than it used to be, but you'll find that if you have a lot of tabs running or you're trying to do like a lot of cool animations, that your computer might start to heat up because the browser is taking up a lot of memory and trying to do a lot of work. And so we want to maybe track what our resolutions are, or maybe track the days of whether I've been vaped on or not, or keep my status and stuff like that. And then have our client-side JavaScript ask the server for that information, and then have the server send it back to us. This is a very basic example of that sort of handshake, but I think it will lead you with a foundation to do more powerful things, like getting information from other, application program interfaces or APIs. So like you can say, like one of my favorite examples of these single page apps is it iced coffee weather yet? I think it is. It's called. I have time. I can just search it. Is it iced coffee weather? Yeah. Is it icedcoffeeweather.com? Right now it's like accessing an API, probably like weather.com or something like that. And then it should be, it's trying to figure out what my location is. So let me put. Okay, so I gave it my zip code, and it determined no, it's not iced coffee weather, which makes sense. I think it's like maybe like, I don't know, like 15 degrees or something like that outside right now. So yeah, maybe it's not iced coffee weather, but this is like a really cool, effective single page app that they've accessed information from forecast.io to get that information, and then they use JavaScript to determine whether that means it's iced coffee weather or not, and then sent it to me to let me know. So we're going to do kind of something like that. App, we had included a resolutions.json file. Now we've looked at JSON before for our package configuration, but resolutions.json is just an array of objects that I had created for each day where I wanted to keep a status of resolutions. So we want to do that with my vape statuses. So let's create a new file. I'm going to call it vape incidents.json. And I'm just going to, there we go. And then I'm just going to paste the resolution stuff. But I'm going to, and you can like name these anything that you want. So I would say day 1, day 2. It's day 5. So let me paste a few more here. And this is like what you're going to be manually updating each day. This could be like your diary of your resolutions, whether you had an iced coffee despite the website telling you it's too cold out. And I'm going to say, was it vaped on? Actually, I've been very lucky to not have been vaped on this year yet, mostly because I've been unlucky to get sick, and so I've spent most of the year inside my apartment, which is a vape-free zone. So in my server, I want to get my vape incidents, and I want to have the client-side code have a URL to go to, much like about the HTML, where instead of sending an HTML file, I'm sending that vape incident data. So let me comment this out. Get our vape incident JSON. I'm just going to rename this to vape incidents. And here's endpoint that will return our incident info. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on here. Basically, I've just renamed a bunch of stuff. So much like you can use require to import an npm module, we are using require to import our JSON. And if you wanted to take a look at what vape incidents is, you can, just like with our client side, you can console log it out. And I'm going to look at the logs here, and this is on our server side code. So our server side activity log is what shows, look, this shows us what our JSON looks like, which makes sense because it was the day, which is a number, and our notes, and each one wasn't baked on. Cool. So we're creating an endpoint, which is just like these routes here, where when a user goes to that or makes a GET request to that URL, we will return them that data. And then this way we don't have to, in the HTML, manually update whether we've been baked on or not. We're going to use the client-side JavaScript to determine that. And so an endpoint allows us to create sort of a location that anybody building an app for our app can hit and access sort of info. There's a lot of services that have endpoints that you can hit, like that is it icecoffeeweather.com site was doing a GET request to some endpoint that forecast.io had. Twitter has API for and various endpoints to get stuff like all of your tweets. Slack has an API for that. Like a lot of services have that allow developers to build things to get info. In this case, this is our own sort of API for our own application, but down the line, you might want to use outside data. I remember one example someone gave on Twitter was like, how about like update the app so that you text whenever you get baked on, so then it automatically updates that stuff. And you can do that because now we have access to the server. We can like listen for that kind of stuff. So we have our endpoint. We're sending vape incidents when anything goes to /vape incidents. But we got to like do something with that, right? So we're going to have to update our client-side JavaScript. So let's see here. That's our app.js here. Now, you can actually, like, you can go to the app /vape incidents and see what it returns to as well. See, my browser, I'm using Firefox, it shows JSON in like a pretty kind of way, but if you see the raw data, it's just like a bunch of text. But the endpoint works, it's accessible. And you can build for your own services, like you can build APIs that require like login. Like you can't just like get every tweet from Twitter. Like you have to create an app on twitter.com's dev site and get like secret tokens and stuff like that. And if that's the case, like for Glitch, we provide you the ability to add secrets to a .env folder, a file. See a little key here. And like if your token was like super secret equals like, wow. Only you will be able to see that secret. Anybody viewing your source won't be able to. Like you probably can't see that I typed wow as the response to that. But we don't have any secrets in this app, so we can get rid of that. But that's a really powerful thing about Glitch as well. And you'll see that as you remix apps using different services that it does that. Okay, so we have our incidents, we have the endpoint for getting them. This code down here is just listens for requests, and so you can like open up your log and see that the app is listening, and you can have it say anything. It's a good way to sort of make sure that you know that the Node application is running. Again, the more information that you give yourself to monitor the app, the better, because if something goes down, you might not have any idea. Cool. So for app.js, we have now different stuff that we want to do, because we no longer want to we've updated the date. We keep the date stuff. We don't want to change that. But I don't want to have to update this status in index.html anymore. What I want to do is I want to get all the vape incidents, and I want to say, well, if the same number of days that have gone by, or the same value of get date, if the value of get date equals the number of incidents in this vape incidents file, well, then I'm just going to assume that the answer is like no, like I haven't been vaped on. Because I'm just deciding myself that I will not update if I haven't been vaped on. You can also like do this to like make sure you keep up to date on your tracking. And there's a number of things that you can do. But I'm just going to say, for the sake of the resolutions app and keeping consistent with that, I'm going to do that. And this gets a little bit tricky. So we got our first step, which is get the date. Then we formatted the date. And then instead of having today on index.html, we had it show the date. And now we have a new step 4. We want to get our vape incidents from the server. And then we want to figure out how many incidents there were, and if it is equal to day, which up here in line 39 we got forget date, update the page to say no, otherwise yes. Okay. This is a very weird example. I'm very sorry, but again, vaping is a very personal, getting vaped on is a very personal issue for me. So in order to get our resolution data is probably my least favorite part, although it's one of the most powerful parts of client-side JavaScript, and that is using Ajax. Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and it allows a way for our client-side JavaScript to access server-side code. So our server has that route, that /vape incidents URL that we can hit. We use Ajax, which is just a way of writing JavaScript to get that. So bear with me here, but I'm going to create a request. I'm going to call it vape incident request. And just like we had created an instance of a date object, we're going to be doing one of what is called an XML HTTP request. And when we create the request, we have to set it up so that once we make the request and we get information, we can call some sort of function. Now, there's more than one way to get information from the server. Somebody in the live chat mentioned the fetch API. There's many APIs for this. XML HTTP requests have been around for a really long time, and so there's a lot of documentation on it, so you're going to encounter it in your Google search. And then you might want to find newer APIs that also work. And also you want to sometimes also set yourself up to make requests to data that is outside of your own application. So we're going to write a couple lines of code that seem really verbose, but this is like how tedious JavaScript can get. And that's why as JavaScript improves with time, things get a little less verbose. So vape incident request, we're going to say we're going to open it. We're going to make a get request because remember our endpoint had the function get. And then our route, which was vape incidents. And then we're going to say vape incident request send. And so just want to double check that vape incidents is the get. Get is the function. But we need to create an event listener that says when this incident is like done and loaded with information, we have to do something with it. And I like to put this right in this order. Vape incident request dot add event listener, and the event listener is load. And we've talked about in the past examples about event listeners and how you can like listen with JavaScript for things like someone clicking their mouse or moving their mouse or doing basically anything on the page. And it could also be anything within the app itself. So we're listening for requests to load. And when it happens, we want to call a function with that data. I'm going to call it vape incident request listener. And I'm going to get an error here because the editor, and Glitch will tell you this, and most editors will tell you this, it's like, what is that? There's like, no, it's not sure like what this like even is. So, so we have to define the vape incident request listener function. And this is where we're going to take that information that we're sent, and we are going to set the inner HTML of our status to yes or no. Just like up here, we set our date inner HTML to the date string. So it's looking for the function to be defined. And so we have to define it before we listed it. If we define a function down here, it's going to, as like a string or something like that. It'll possibly work, but I like to define my stuff here. And scope in JavaScript is really hard to understand. So I'm going to say vape incident request listener equals function. Okay, we have our function. So remember, we have our onload event here, by the way. That's what we're doing here, but instead of the window, we're doing on the vape incident. So here we have our function. We've created a function. We've talked about this in my first app JavaScript example. And so anything that happens, anything that's in here will happen when this is called. And this will be called when our request loads, and our request was to vape incidents, which we had set as an endpoint on our server. So you can see the handshake happening in process, but now we actually have to do something. So what we're going to be sent, and you can look up more info on MDN on XML HTTP requests. You can read more on the XHR API, and they also have like information on the object and different methods. Like we opened it, you can end it if there's an error, and what we're going to get back is response text, and that response text should be what the server is sending to us, which should be the contents of our JSON file. So let's get this going real quick because we don't have much time left. So I'm going to say our vape data equals this dot response text. And this is a keyword that's referencing the data that we're getting back from this request. And yeah, so like this response refers to vape incident request. But we have to parse it because when we were logging out our JSON in on the server side, there's all sorts of escape things that happen, like adding slashes before single quotes and apostrophes and stuff like that. We have to parse the data because we can't really do anything with just plain JSON. It's just like a blob of stuff. We want to create an object out of it that we can then take a look at. And so we call on JSON.parse around this. This is also something that I forget to do all the time. So if you're working with JSON or Ajax stuff and you're like, how come I can't do anything with what I'm getting back? You most likely need to parse it, and you can always search MDN or anything like else for that information. Okay, so we have our data, and I want to say that if the vape data dot length, because we'll be getting a number of items in our object and we can determine the length of it, that's a property of it. If it equals day, that's our if statement, then I want to set status to yes. And if not, I want to set status to no. Now we have to figure out how to get the status, and we can just do what we did up here with our date, where we got the element by ID date and then set the inner HTML. Our item, according to our index.html, has an ID of status. And so we're going to get that item, const, and call it status element equals document.get element by ID. And remember, this is so hard. I mess this up all the time. These should be lowercase. And we have our status element. And we're just going to say status element dot inner HTML equals yes. And if not, status element dot inner HTML equals no. Okay. Does this work? Okay, so this is saying, yes, I have been vaped on, but I haven't. Oh, you know what it is? Because I want to have my incidence was that I wasn't vaped on, but I want to say that if I have the same number, if I only update this when I haven't been vaped on, then that means that it should equal, and that means it should be no. And so let's replace this with no. Say yes. And then I haven't been. But then if on day 3, I was vaped on and I'm like, I don't want to talk about it, then it shows, yes, I must have been vaped on this month. And that's basically it. So in just about an hour, we learned a little bit, a very little bit about Node, and took a static site and made it full stack on Glitch, and learned that I'm hung up on some weird stuff. So if you want more info on Node, in the first app Node README file. I wrote a short introduction to it. Again, it's very, very short. But if you scroll to the end, there's link to the node documentation. I recommend MDN's introduction to Express a Node, which includes all sorts of information about it, as well as beginner tutorials. Again, there's a lot of information, but down here they have an Express tutorial that takes you from like making a site to deploying it, which you don't have to deal with if you work with it on Glitch. And also, we have Learn to Code apps on Glitch. And we also have, if you go to glitch.com/nodeschool, workshoppers on JavaScript and learning Node and other aspects of Node, also Markdown, HTML. And if you go to glitch.com, we now have Learning Code 2018, which will have more stuff in the future. We have a starter kit on Learning React, and we have a category Learning to Code, which has all sorts of other fun stuff for learning, like a Node beginner workshop, starting out with HTML if you want to practice more of that, and other cool, fun stuff. But again, at the end of the day, I just want you to know that if you went through this series this week, you did a lot. And if you need more time to do it, that's also like really great. Practice is the best thing. Nothing that you do in these apps is gonna it's not life or death, I hope. And if you get stuck, feel free to highlight the code where you're having trouble, and you can ask the community for help. And you can say what trouble you're having, tag it, ask for help. And then those of us on glitch.com will see who needs help. And it's a pretty fun way to meet friends also, and get involved in collaborating with teams if you're not able to. And also know that, the way that I write my code might be different from the code that you write or that someone else you knows writes. That's a hard thing about web development also. There's a lot of ways to do the same thing. Some people don't use semicolons. Some projects I don't. Are they required? Most of the time, no, but it depends on what language you're working with. So if you get hung up on that, the internet's your friend, and hopefully you have friends who are nice and will answer your questions. And if not, the Glitch community will do that. So I hope this was fun for you. It was for me, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. And next week, we're going to be doing some more cool stuff and tutorials, so stay tuned for that. But get some rest because you wrote a lot of code, and so did I. Bye.